I'm going to open Q&A later on, but I got some questions I think we've discussed before. First and foremost, I think there's a lot of people in people's mind. The standard thing that we get from the public is this. Good, MACC is doing this, MACC is doing this, Commander is doing this, but all you do is catch the small fish. What happens to the big fish? Are there any cases, or are there any, things that proves that even the big fish not get away? Ikan bilis yang tangkap, Jaws tak tangkap.
Actually, the jerung is out there, right? Ikan jerung is out there. We need to be able to catch it, cook it, and eat it, right? And
not literally though, because they're endangered.
Yeah, but effectively, I don't want to speak on behalf of MACC, but I know for a fact they do have the cases. It's a matter of when they get to charge,
yes,
and prosecute. So we're working with MACC on how fast they can get the cases to prosecution. And we're also, it's part of what we're doing on, working on the MACC transformation, is to improve their strike rate, meaning, conviction rates.
Okay.
Yeah, another thing you have to remember that when we talk about corruption, right, especially high-profile cases, those cases are more complex than normal cases. So it will take some time, because for MACC and for the AG itself, they need at least 90% of confidence level before they can actually prosecute, especially high-profile cases. So it takes time, and yeah. So like Ravi said, we are working on transformation of MACC, transformation program for MACC. We hope by next year we'll be able to bring those big fishes on the table.
Okay, now, in most corruption cases, usually we hear big corruption cases. For instance, a certain political secretary and instant aid to a certain minister. It was announced, say, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and they get away with it. They were brought to court and everything, and usually what are the difficulty in proving, say, a corruption case in courts? Is there a problem with our court? Is there a problem with our Attorney General prosecution? Or is it the law, or how is it?
Let me give you one example. I won't cite the case, right? I'll give you a very generic example of the bigger the case, or the more high profile the person is, right? You need to prove that the cash transferred hands, right? There have been instances where these datos or whoever, right?
Oh, yeah.
While the transaction is happening, yeah, the dato was present for a little while, but walks away. He brings in a guy to the room, a guy whoever's transacting has never seen before. No formal introductions are made, so meaning, I don't know your name, I've never seen you before,
right,
but I'm giving you the cash, right? You're counting the cash and you walk out.
Oh, okay.
Dato comes in and says, okay, thank you very much. Right? Now, how do you prove
that the Dato got the money?
Yeah.
When you don't even know who's the other guy.
Yeah. So when whoever this guy is who was transacting the deal, right, when he's asked in court, so who's this witness? Who was the guy? How did you hand the cash? Dato, huh? So what's his name? What did he look like? I've never seen him before. So the thing is, when the more higher the profile, the smarter they get. So that's why we need to employ a lot more smarter people to help us identify, okay, what other way can we get it? It's easier for us to extradite financial information from Switzerland for example, because the Swiss banks have been under a lot more scrutiny. So it's a lot easier now getting Swiss bank accounts than from Singapore.
Is it really? Wow.
So the minute it crosses the causeway, 18 months.
I see. But isn't everything recorded? So even after 18 months, they're still there?
Yeah, but you see, that's the thing. 18 months is a long time for you to tamper with it.
Suddenly witness gone and such.
And most high-profile cases, right, the reason they dilute is witnesses turn hostile.
I see.
Or they disappear.
Or the witness got private.
Something will happen.
Alright, let's take a question from the floor, yes.
Okay, my name is Zikin from NRC. Thanks for coming here, Ravi and Lokman. So I have a simple question which is built on top of the answer that you gave just now, the prosecution aspect of the corruption case. So I remember when Tun Mahathir was the Prime Minister, so there were a lot of menaces happening as well, not necessarily just corruption. Take for instance, drugs. So what he did was really ingenious. He switched the burden of proof, for instance, in the Penal Code and the Dangerous Drug Acts back from the the prosecution to the defendant, so it makes it much easier for the prosecution to prove. And they did that to the NACC Act and formerly the ACA Act by way of reversing the burden to prove the crime, the element of the crime, back to the defendant by way of just raising the element of graft. So if I can just raise the issue that there's a sudden amount, of whether money or benefits or bank accounts, there's sudden increment of money that you cannot justify, I'll assume that your guilty is proof it. So earlier you were saying that you're looking at ways in which you can facilitate this process by way of looking at more experts, whatnot. Why don't you just amend the law and make it much easier for the prosecution to work on this issue? Make the element that they have to prove, the standard proving lower, make it much easier. That's my question. Thank you.
So the burden of proof is on the
reverse the burden of proof on many elements. There are a lot of elements that you have to prove.
Yes.
Just reverse it on things that the prosecution find it really hard to prove. Ask them to disprove.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure. Right. I think that's a very good question. Right.
Yeah, good question. First of all, like Ravi mentioned just now, we're actually been locked in the lab, so-called lab, for more than 5 weeks now. We're thinking way forward for a government transformation program for fighting corruption. Yeah, one of the things we're looking at is amending the MACC Act and some other relevant acts. Of course, we're looking into that as well, one. Secondly, we're talking about persecution in corruption cases, right? In Malaysia, we have different bodies, for example, to ensure the check and balance, we have MACC and AGC to prosecute. There's a problem there. We identified there is a problem when IPs or investigation papers submitted to AGC for prosecution, the ding-dong happened. So one of the things we're looking at in the lab is to reduce the number of ding-dongs between these two parties. So to answer your question, we're looking into amending the current MACC Act and other relevant acts related to corruption. Thanks.
Also, don't forget some of these acts, right, like NRC11 Act, some of it may require constitutional change, some of it requires just a law change. So the minute it hits the constitution, it becomes a lot more complex. So it's something that we are putting through, but it will take time.
All right, yes, sir.
Hi, good evening. I'm Yahya from Malaysia. I have two questions here. I want to assess the right of disclaimer. Okay, for the first question, regarding the whistleblower framework, I believe that whistleblower shouldn't be described in any of the physical. Just now you already described the physical. Now, if I'm going out, I see people, big people with tattoo here. In my mind, I would think maybe this is the person you were saying just now. It's like you already disclosed some of the physical especially of the whistleblower, and also some recent cases like whistleblower of NRC wasn't just being disclosed but also being filed against him for disclosing some of it. Okay, my second question is regarding this fact.
Can you repeat the first question?
So because it's supposed to be that you shouldn't disclose, right, some of
the whistleblower act is to protect the identity. So, and your question was?
Just some comment because
the comment.
You already discussed some of the physical characteristics of the
attributes like tattoo
and also
hair.
the recent cases, one of the whistleblower of NRC was not just being disclosed, also being filed against him
Oh, yeah, the NFC news. Yeah, okay.
This is my question. The second question, because I'm a student.
Okay.
This is 2007, and now we are in 2012. So the data might be obsolete because from 5 years there are a few changes, like implemented on GDP, the tsunami policy in 2008, also changes of prime ministers. Do you have like the recent database regarding this? And also, I want to ask also the cases of the corruption that happens between this year. So, is there any correlation between this year and between the survey and also the actual cases of corruption? Okay,
thanks. That's a great question.
The first question, the only reason I was actually bold enough to talk about the case of the tattoo guy is because it was deemed that it wasn't a corruption case. It was actually a criminal case. So he came in as a whistleblower, but I use that as an example to tell the public, don't come to me. Go trust. You see, public needs to have trust in the enforcement agency. Go to the enforcement agency, give your evidence. And evidence also has to be solid evidence, right? Not in the form of surat layans, right? We need to have your name, your address, because a lot of times, and this is another interesting one, right? Whistleblowers are usually 90% of the time are part of the problem. They were also part of the takers. Usually the whistleblower was part of the deal. It's only when the deal goes sour that he turns to become a whistleblower.
Yes.
Right? So at some point, that whistleblower may have to become a witness. So we need to know your identity. And if necessary, from the whistleblower protection, we need to switch you over under a different act, which is the Witness Protection Act. So it's not a simple thing. But public needs to be aware of how to do the whistleblowing. And your next question, I mean, the study was done 2002, 2007. We're looking for recent studies, or we may actually conduct one shortly, right, to look at how things are. But what is alarming to us is, if these kids had graduated sometime 2008, they are mid-level managers today. Yeah. So there are mid-level managers who think it's okay to bribe. It's okay to take the bribe. And those mid-level managers are having kids already. And what are they teaching their kids? So the point is, we need to arrest the situation.
It's quite disturbing that 1 in 4 university students thinks it's okay to give bribes. 1 in 4. Wow. Okay, sir.
If you like to have a correlation between this data and the other one, for your information, yesterday we just discovered a new finding that 70% of corruption offenders today are actually below 40. So actually that correlates with this data.
70% is below 40.
Yeah. 70%.
Oh, okay. That's a very high correlation then. Right, now before we go on the floor, I just want to touch on a bit on the NRC case. So, let's just say the Whistleblower Act can only be enacted upon a whistleblower if he or she becomes a whistleblower and reports it to the relevant authorities, right? So if he or she goes to a newspaper or a politician, it can't. Well, I think that's the case with NFC. And also, I think in the case of NRC, they sued the bank under BAFIA, the bank accounts finance something, for releasing some papers, I think. Right. Okay. Anyway, yes. Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Ravindran. So I have a few questions to ask you. So first of all, regarding the whistleblower, I'm asking at the correct point. Okay. Anyway, so about this whistleblower, how do you ensure that the whistleblower is actually correct? Well, perhaps like when you say the situation just now is he may be part of the deal itself and everything. So how do you ensure that he is saying the truth, how do you ensure that he is not just framing a person just because he is the enemy of that person, or he just wants to make that person's business or the conglomerate go down? That is question one. Now my second question would be, how is it that, at the start of this seminar or forum, we talk about this, what we usually commonly face, this police and corruption, right? But the thing is, usually the normal words the police will use on you. Bayar RM50 ke atau saman RM300 kerana tak renew license or something like that, right? So, well, and logically, for every single human being who wants to part with RM300 when they could part with RM50, right? I mean, like, everybody will say, oh, okay, maybe it down in our hearts or in our minds, we'll say, oh, it's wrong, we should not abide corruption, we should, like, pay the fine. Everybody will say that, but truthfully, logically, anyone of you who is in the middle class range, any one of you would rather pay RM300 than RM50?
I would.
Well, you would. Probably. Just one in so many, right? So logically, how do you actually solve this? Because it is still happening and this is a logical thing.
Yes.
What will you say?
That's a valid question. That's a very valid question.
So,
Let me respond to your. Let me respond before you go on.
Okay.
Before I forget that. The first one, right? Yeah, how do you verify if he's a true whistleblower? You know, it's a great question. And this is when you really need to take your hat off to MACC. Imagine what they have to put up with on a daily basis. Right? We complain about those guys, but it's a really hard job to do. Day in, day out, going in and saying, I've got to fight corruption. Second thing, your question about, the cop stops you and he says, what, bayar sini ke, bayar dekat balai, right? 300 ke, RM50. Let me recount a story. Right? This happened to my colleague in Pemandu. This young lady, lawyer, she's a really small but feisty lawyer. Okay, she was speeding and she got caught. 2 cops. Right? She called me up. She said, "I've been caught. Should I give in?" I said, "No. Let's see what they do." It was at night. The 2 cops intimidated her. Totally intimidated her into giving the bribe. She stood firm. Okay. She took the ticket and we reported it. Right? And the reason I insisted on the ticket is because the officer's badge number is on the ticket. Right? And you can make an immediate complaint. So if you succumb to the RM50, then don't complain if you can't stop the bribery, because you haven't stopped the giving. And just one other point. More often than not, now these friends of mine who kind of want to adhere to this, right? I urge you, push back on the officer and say, give it to me. 80% of the time, he will say, okay, la jalan. Why? Because if he does give it to you, his badge number is in your hands.
That's a very good trick. Yeah, okay, you can give me a shot. Oh, okay, thanks. Yes, well, okay. She pointed out a very good point. She made a very good point, mostly about police, because we've been talking about cases, whistleblower and such. But in case of even those who raise up their hands, I'm really sure their corruption cases or their bribery giving mostly involve police officers, custom officers, or immigration officers. This very petty and mid and low ranking government servants. Now, since Pemandu started and since ACA became MACC, what are the corruption rate in, say, the police force and also this mid-level? Has it dropped down significantly? Or has the reports came up? Is the awareness better?
Okay, the only thing we can measure is from the perception survey done by TNS.
Okay, it's perception survey, is it?
Yeah, perception survey done by TNS. Over the years, you can see a steady improvement. Basically, previously the score was like 3.5. Now it's improved to 2.9. Basically, the lower the score is better. So that's the only measure we can think of. And of course, if you look at all enforcement agencies, the most improved agency is actually MACC. So, them as the enforcement agency for corruption, right? So yeah, and the most famous, so-called famous agency is police department. So
it's gone down.
Yeah, it's gone up.
So the perception has gone down.
Yeah.
As the prosecution rate went up, is there more cases reported, or they just stopped taking?
It's kind of difficult to say.
Oh, yeah, that's not much.
Yeah.
Judging from our name and shame database, you can see the number of prosecution that have gone up.
It's gone up.
Of police officers and customs officers.
By the custom duty, the amount of duty that you managed to collect it from high, I think that, custom is very quick up, it's a bit hard. Okay, is there a question on the floor? Okay, yes.
Hello, hi, Mr. Ravi, Lukman. I'd just like to ask a question. I mean, since you also stress out how important it is for us to crack the perception of people, to trust the system, again, of course, involving fighting corruption. My question to you would be like this. I mean, what are the efforts taken by Pemandu, of course, to explain to the people, apart from posting very big ads in newspapers, of our achievement and results in fighting corruption, when on daily and weekly basis we have speakers, political speakers from various political parties saying that the ministers are rasuah here, rasuah UMNO here and there on daily and weekly basis. So what is Pemandu doing? And of course correcting this perception, because we are considering the election is quite near. So the opposition party is very, very keen to enforce the perception that Malaysia is full of corruption and there is nothing can be done except by voting them. So is Pemandu trying to can do something about publishing these results that you have achieved in terms of letting the public to trust the system once again? Yeah.
The battle of perception, yes, again. So.
Yeah, the thing about corruption is that it's perception versus reality, right?
Yeah, that's the big problem. Okay.
So yeah, once again, from the only measure we have now is all the that can measure perception, either locally or internationally, right? What we do in Pemandu is that, of course, we just want to highlight all the good things that we have done, one. But on the other hand, the CPI, that is the international survey on corruption, doesn't really help. So one most important thing is that to let the public understand that CPI actually measures international perception towards Malaysia, all right? And there's only so much we can do, but we're working closely with MACC actually to improve the perception.
I guess your question is very pertinent. What are we doing? Let me ask you this: what am I doing here today? Yeah. So I mean, we're constantly looking for avenues to tell the public. Go public. I went on BFM, right? As much as possible, but without necessarily letting it become too stale. Online, yeah, we do, but maybe not enough. Maybe we should do more. You're right. And we need people like yourselves. Go tweet, go talk. Tell people. Stop the giving. Take the ticket. Sorry. Take the ticket.
Right. Okay. Now, since we're touching on it, I think there was a question, but is there anyone? Okay, cool. I'll let you go first then.
I have another question for you. So this is about my friend in China. He's in Shanghai right now, and his grandmother has to do an operation. And he says that in China, everyone who wants to do an operation, you have to pay like 10,000 renminbi, which is equals to 5,000 ringgit of bribe. In addition to the cost of the operation, in order to ensure that your operation gets done and that you get to be the first one. And also, he says that I said, why don't you, is it the same private and government? He said, yeah. So if you were in his place, what would you do?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Again, thank you very much for that question.
That's a tough one.
Aren't you glad you live in Malaysia?
I pay it, it's my grandma.
But think about it. It's not just China. There are quite a number of countries around where we live that you have to bribe just to have medical treatment. Right? This is one of the things you guys can go online and say, hey, we don't have to do that. We have government hospitals that can actually save lives.
All right, now, before we go on, because it's the same set of questions, I'll ask for some of the questions. Now, we always listen to stories about how police officers take bribes or government officers take. Are there any out there, I hope there is, good stories where actually you have officers and government servants who actually reported on how people are trying to bribe them? Are there any, do you have any stories like that?
Yeah, I think last year there were 2 policemen in Shah Alam. Someone tried to bribe them, and
yes, sir. Okay.
Someone tried to bribe them, and they actually reported the case, and basically they got rewarded. These 2 policemen in Shah Alam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Bribe for what, may I ask? Okay, it's not clear. Okay, sure. Right.
Sorry,
same 3 people. Okay, go on.
It's okay. Ravi and Lakman, certainly while listening to your answer, I had 2 questions pop up in my mind. So when you did the 3 areas of concern where you segregated them according to enforcement agency, government procurement, and also the grand institutionalized corruption, from what I've recalled over the past few years was that the main institutionalized corruption went public was the PKFZ case, which was exposed none other by the member of the government himself, the then MCA president. But the issue is this. Earlier there were reports saying that the leakages that has been caused by corruption has amounted to more than 100 billion ringgit. Unless you would like to deny that or saying that this is not from a credible source, which I would submit or succumb to. But sorry, as of now, okay, the focuses of the Pemandu performance management team of this NKRA alone has always been focusing on the small fish, which are the enforcement agencies, and also the procurement cases where the amount of corruption does not necessarily contribute to any significant portion of the 100 billions of leakages. That's my first question. What is your approach against this institutionalized corruption? Like for instance, let's say if I'm whistleblowing, telling you that I know that the Ministry of Finance, it's actually giving out procurement worth 200 billion, asking for a marginal, marginal raise of 20%.
Oh, 20%.
How would you do that? And how would your approach be coming from Pemandu, coming from your team of people? That's the first question. Second question is, when you talk about the issue of the relationship between the Intermediaries Chamber and the MECC, was that investigative power is the exclusive purview of the MECC, whereas the prosecution lies solely on the purview of the agency. But is that a way for you to fuse or accord? You see, for instance, in the Securities Commission, Securities Industry Act, they allowed officers from the Securities Commission to prosecute where the issues is specifically on the securities industry area. Would you think it's possible where, issues specific on that would be allowed?
Yes and no, but again, we'll be charged for, it's all the ikan bilis that you're allowing, right? But yeah, the big fish, hopefully we'll catch it with some of these integrity packs that we're putting in place. I mean, we're just putting big nets, big walls, just as deterrents.
Right, now, yes, I'm going to give to the people who haven't questioned yet. You've been waiting for just now, then I'll go that side. Is that cool? Okay, that's a question. Boleh cakap je lah. Okay. Okay. PPRT. OCF, okay. Sekejap, macam boleh tak pergi kat mic? Bagi semua orang dengar, macam cerita menarik ni. Macam best pula. Okay je, okay.
Saya suka berkongsi lah.
Bagus. Kita nak berkongsi.
Saya terlibat dalam pencegah rasuah. Saya terlibat dalam NGO, full komitmen di NGO. Maknanya saya berusaha keras untuk memeras rasuah.
NGO apa nama?
Saya Suara Inspirasi Malaysia.
Okey,
untuk masalah itu. Jadi masalah yang saya hadapi untuk memeras rasuah, sebenarnya apa yang saya dapati bahawa pelaksanaan apabila kita dapati bahawa benda itu terbukti rasuah. Kita tadi kita cerita tentang whistleblower, apa yang kita buat, tetapi apa yang berlaku pelaksanaan itu tak dapat disampaikan yang kita nampak. Contohnya yang saya boleh bagi contoh tentang sijil layak menduduki rumah. Kita sekarang dah pakai CCC, sekarang dah pakai yang baru ni lah. Kalau dulu kita pakai CCC, sekarang CCC kan. Dulu sijil layak menduduki rumah. Contohnya satu bangunan tu perlu ada tong sampah sebanyak 4 biji. Saya ambil simple 4 biji tong sampah, setiap ada 2 rumah sampah 4 biji. Apabila kita dapati bahawa surat tu mengatakan kena ada 4 biji, mana 8 biji. Tapi yang ada 2 biji saja. Dah proof. Kalau tak ada tu tak boleh lulus. Confirm. Apabila kita hantar surat, kita hantar ke SPRM, kita ada surat-surat yang kita hantar, kita bagi tahu. Apa yang berlaku sekarang ni, tong sampah tu datang semula. Tak ada tindakan, tapi tindakan ni memaju hantar. That kita rasakan rakyat sekarang ni bosan. Bosan dengan perkara itu. Tapi saya rasa tertarik apabila saya pergi ke SPRM. Timbalan SPRM mengatakan bahawa tiga akta yang ada dalam Malaysia, iaitu kita memberi pun kena dakwa, menerima pun kena dakwa, tak bagi tahu pun boleh kena dakwa. Jadi sekarang ni kita apa yang dekat sini saya suka berkongsi lah. Tiga perkara ni yang patut kita semua rakyat Malaysia tahu. Ini yang perlu ditekankan bahawa rakyat Malaysia perlu tahu perkara ini. Terima kasih tuan.
Tapi Pak, masalah apa? Banyak kes sini ya. Contohnya macam bangunan, tanah kita tahu. Contohnya pembinaan bangunan tepi bukit tak boleh buat. Kadang-kadang engineer lalu dia kata okey, cerun ni lebih daripada 700. Tapi ada bangunan situ. Jadi katalah, let's say encounter this kind of cases. Katalah kita jumpa kes-kes macam ni. Macam mana orang awam nak buat? You know, there's an issue of corruption. Kita tahu ada macam nampak seolah-olah unsur rasuah. Sebab macam dia kata tadi, tong sampah benda mudah macam tu je. Jadi macam mana nak pergi dah?
Okay, I think saya suka berkongsi dari segi statistik dulu lah. For your information, last year 2011, MACC menerima about 1,300 maklumat termasuk apa saja surat aduan. 1,300.
Okay,
1,300. Okay. They filter lah banyak peringkat sampai they can actually prepare the IP. Okay. In the end, hanya 200 kes sahaja yang boleh dibawa ke mahkamah. Okay. One of the reasons is that kita talking about satu kes rasuah, kita nampak satu kes rasuah berlaku, tetapi bila kita kemukakan maklumat kepada MACC, pertama sekali maklumat tu mungkin tak cukup. Pertama. Yang kedua, silap di bahagian MACC juga sebenarnya ialah kurang kooperatif. Correct. Right. Sebab tu daripada findings sekarang ni we're doing a study on MACC. Those are the problems we saw in MACC. So
the time for them to react is also slow.
Yeah.
So that time lag beri dia peluang untuk tamper dengan evidence. So macam you katalah tadi, Tuan Sabah pun sudah sampai.
Yeah.